Hey everyone, welcome back to my podcast, Anatomy and Physiology Bit by Bit. This is your host, Dr. Steve Sullivan, coming to you from Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Once again, where I teach A&P at Bucks County Community College, and I've been doing that since 2002. So it's been quite some time now. Today's episode, we're going to finish the endocrine system, and we're going to talk about some endocrine glands we still have left, as well as some tissues and organs that secrete hormones, even though they're not pure endocrine glands. But before we do that, I had a conversation with a friend of mine who is a health and wellness coach. And we talked about what that means, how you become one, and what she does for people as a health and wellness coach. She is my friend Kira Kramen. She is in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, which is right here in Bucks County, where I live. And we've known each other for a couple of years now. And she really shared a lot of what it means to be a health and wellness coach and what it means to really take the reins of your own health and be proactive about remaining healthy, about avoiding disease, and about cutting habits that could be detrimental to your overall wellness. So, I want to start with that conversation. So, I hope you enjoy it. I want to give you a quick little background. Kira Kramen, once again, is a national board certified health and wellness coach, a certified tobacco training specialist, and a CDC certified diabetes prevention lifestyle coach. So, we're going to talk about smoking and smoking cessation, which means quitting smoking. We're going to talk about diet. We're going to talk about avoidance of disease. And I think it's going to be really interesting to you. Her website is awellfedlife.org. I'm going to put it in the show notes. So, if you want to visit her website and see what it is she does, you can go ahead and do that. So please join me in welcoming my good friend, certified health and wellness coach, Kira Kramen. All right, Kira Kramen, certified health and wellness coach. Welcome to the podcast. I really appreciate you joining me.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I'm really curious as to what a health and wellness coach does and how you become a health and wellness coach, and also what kind of got you interested in this line of work. So, if you don't mind, just kind of giving us a background of what you did before you were a health and wellness coach and what kind of got you interested in it.
Mm, Let me see if I can make this succinct. So, I have a bachelor's degree in psychology, always been interested in people and how people tick. My goal as a younger person was to be an art therapist, and that didn't quite transpire. I'm also an artist, so I was trying to mix the two, but didn't quite work out. So I ended up going into a corporate career in human resources for 10 years. And then I had my kids and I decided to stay home for a bit with them. And when I was ready to go back, I sort of stumbled into the field of health education. And in addition to being a health coach, I'm also a health educator. And I've been working in the tobacco control field for about 16 years, specifically helping people quit smoking. As I was going forward as a health educator, I also got personally interested, like in my own health. For me, it was more about eating a lot of sugar, and that was mostly what was sort of my health problem. As I was sort of going forward in my journey to release that what I call an addiction to sugar, I sort of again stumbled into the field of health coaching, which was super new. This was probably 8, 10 years ago that I discovered this field. So I decided, hey, I could do this. I could be a health coach. And so I took a training class with the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. I got certified there. And there was a brand new board certification that had just come out from the National Board of Medical Examiners. It was a board certified health and wellness coaching certification. So now I'm a national board certified health and wellness coach.
Sounds like the certification process is fairly rigorous to make sure that people who get that certification really know what they're doing. What would be like a day to day when you have a client? What are you actually coaching them on specifically?
Yeah, so I'm very holistic. We talk about the four pillars of nutrition, physical activity, sleep, and stress management. With the coaching, the premise is that the client is wearing the expert hat. They're the best expert in their own selves. And my job as a coach is to help them tap into that. We all know we should eat more vegetables, but why don't we? We all know we should exercise, but what are the challenges and barriers to doing that? So my job is to help people, tap into that inner wisdom and help them kind of come up with a plan to slowly, gradually improve their wellness. And it might be by eating better, it might be by moving more, it might be by improving their sleep, and almost universally, we need to work on their stress. It's all about behavior change so that it becomes part of their lifestyle and not just something they're doing to lose 10 pounds or get ready for a wedding or, that kind of thing.
You're talking about nutrition, you're talking about physical activity, you're talking about sleep and stress. And my students and most of the students who are studying anatomy and physiology know the hormones involved in stress and how physiologically significant that is. They know that physical activity is a cornerstone to maintaining health. We've known that for decades and decades and decades. The nutrition, for sure. I mean, biochemistry starts with the molecules you're putting in your mouth. Can we talk about smoking for a bit? We're so in line with this because I've been telling my students for a very, very long time, if they're a smoker, they've got to stop. If they're not, they've got to never start.
It is an addiction, of course, an addiction to the drug of nicotine, which is a stimulant. I always tell people there's three parts to the nicotine addiction. It's the physical, biological, chemical addiction to the drug of nicotine, which is a brain chemistry thing. The receptors in the brain very quickly get used to having nicotine. We most of us start smoking as teenagers, and it's almost instant that the receptors in the brain fire up, and then it becomes a thing of when they don't get that drug, the body goes into withdrawal, and withdrawal is so uncomfortable that people keep putting the drug in their body. So it's a physical addiction. It's also becomes a psychological addiction, where you are smoking with all kinds of triggers throughout your day, and you're smoking to numb your emotions, and you're smoking to deal with stress. So for the physical addiction, we recommend medications, nicotine replacement medications, or there's two FDA approved oral medications for smoking cessation, Wellbutrin and Chantix, which I could go into, but those are the two drugs. And then there's the patch, the gum, and the lozenge. So that helps with the physical addiction. And then the psychological addiction is really where we have to look at everything that's triggering us to smoke and figure out some alternatives. If it's after a meal, maybe we get up and take a walk instead of smoking. Or if we're smoking in the car, it's having some snacks in the car instead of cigarettes. And then we have to learn how to manage stress. That's really the kicker with smoking cessation, because that's always the thing that makes people relapse. And so I use mindfulness-based stress reduction strategies with my clients to help them learn how to manage stress. It's everywhere. We don't learn how to manage it really. There's no courses on that in high school or college really, and it's a stressful culture to live in. And many of us just, I mean, I have the sugar thing, which I struggle with still. When I get really stressed out, I want to eat cake. So I've learned how to, kind of take that pause, go into the mindfulness-based stress reduction strategies, and hopefully respond to stress rather than react by reaching for sugar. So
Right. I mean, I want to eat cake even when I'm not stressed. So there's
yes,
that.
that is sure.
but but for sure, yeah, sugar is a big one, and the way we have over refined sugar to put in our foods and things like that, and we have these enormous number of calories that exist in the things that we're putting in our mouths, and a lot of it is calories that have zero nutrition behind them other than the actual calorie itself. And I mean, I think I came across somebody, we were talking about like a 12-ounce can of Coca-Cola, for example, and it has the equivalent of 10 teaspoons of sugar in it. And I try to get my students to take a look at it because they'll show up to class with that 12-ounce can or 20-ounce bottle even. Could you imagine getting a glass of something and then Think about the time it would take you to put 10 teaspoons of sugar into that. You would never, ever do that. You'd recognize how much sugar you're putting into it when you're doing it yourself, and you would never, ever put that in your body. I think a lot of it is they're just not aware of exactly what is in this stuff.
Awareness is key. Making people aware of even things like mayonnaise and salad dressing and spaghetti sauce all have sugar in them. I mean, this is not a mistake. The food industry knows what they're doing. I'm actually doing some continuing education, and I just listened to a lecture on the food industry, and which is part of why I got into this too, is feeling very frustrated with our healthcare system, our food systems, all of it. But a lot of
Yeah,
my clients are 45 plus, let's say. It's that physically and mentally, and I just don't feel good anymore. And what can I do? And then they come to me for help.
I come back to the smoking real quick because what I notice that I try to explain to my students that when you inhale something, it's going to cross the pulmonary capillaries to get into your bloodstream. And then those chemicals are going to make it everywhere in your body. And I know we talked about the nicotine and the addiction, but when it comes to cigarette smoke, there's way more than nicotine in there that's harming us, right? And
Yeah.
people don't realize that this is beyond just respiratory disease. That this goes all around your body. And you mentioned being holistic in your practice, and I think that that's an important thing that I tell my students all the time. Their body is a collaborative effort of all things working together. We study it as individual organs and organ systems because it's simple that way, but that is not how it functions.
The other thing people don't realize is that the byproduct of smoking, one of the byproducts is carbon monoxide. So when we're taking in cigarette smoke, we're taking in carbon monoxide, small amounts, but it's
Hmm.
significant in that it replaces, and you probably know more about this than I do. So a carbon monoxide molecule is larger than an oxygen molecule. It actually displaces the oxygen in your bloodstream. So now you've got blood circulating all throughout your body that is depleted of oxygen. It's got this carbon monoxide in it. So you're right. It's not just the heart and lungs. It's the digestive system, the reproductive system, the nervous system, your skin. Why smokers look older because they're not getting enough oxygen to their skin. It's huge, really huge. We actually have carbon monoxide monitors where we can. It's like a breathalyzer, and people can breathe in, and we can see what their levels are prior to quitting, and then they'll come back after they've quit. And it only takes about 48 hours for the carbon monoxide to exit the body. So they'll come back and they'll have like a 0 or a 1 where it was a 35 before. So it's pretty cool.
Wow, that's impactful to actually see that happen. What are some of the services that you would offer if a client was to come to you? Is it one-on-one? Is it group classes? Is it couples?
For the smoking side, which I work for an agency, we're all it's all group. And so we know that being in a group is a gold standard for smoking cessation. So that's all group. But in my private practice, I do groups and one-on-one. Right now, I'm mostly doing one-on-ones. It just seems to be what people want. And with COVID, I used to have an office in Doylestown, but I've had to pivot to Zoom during COVID, and it seems like that's what people like. So I'm mostly seeing people on Zoom now, and we do hour-long session. Usually, I'll recommend that people book a six session package just because it takes, several times of learning their history and setting goals and that kind of thing to reach certain goals that they might have. So yeah, so it'll be one-on-one, and I'll do a little health history on people, and then we will talk about what they think, they could work on first and second and third. And then what I do mostly is help them over the hurdles and barriers to getting there, to eating better, to getting some movement in. So it might be helping them with some recipes. The concepts are simple. It's not complicated nutrition science. It's the being able to do it that's hard and complicated.
We know that anyone can find the information on what to eat and
Yeah.
that you got to exercise and things like that, right? That's out there. But the idea is that it sounds like what you're doing is giving people or helping people find strategies that work for them to actually do those things.
That's it. And also figuring out when you can fit it in. This whole model of having to take an hour-long class at a gym, especially as we're aging, it doesn't work for people. So helping people figure out how can I fit in 15 minutes here and 15 minutes there. And that's the hurdle for people. They can do it for X amount of time, and then if maybe they lose that 10 pounds or whatever, and then oh, I did it. I lost the 10 pounds, and then they stop, and then what's going to happen? Right back up. And that we know that the yo-yo, the up and down of the weight is actually worse for you than being at the higher weight. So,
Yeah, I'm actually gonna give a quick plug to another podcast because I just listened to an episode of a podcast called Ologies with Ali Ward. And that podcast just had a guest on who talked about metabolism. Some of the things that that guest brought up about metabolism and what we're doing to affect our metabolism was shocking. And yeah, the massive weight loss, the very fast, massive amounts of weight loss are your body's going to react to that energy deprivation, and it's going to start utilizing less energy. And so your metabolic rate will go down. And that's why people trail off.
the reality is we are just so off track with our healthcare in this country. It's absolutely devastating. I just Can I throw out a couple statistics?
Absolutely. I love statistics. Numbers are good.
Numbers are good, yeah. If we keep going the way we're going with our food system and our healthcare system, which is all about managing symptoms, not finding root causes, and not changing lifestyle, by 2030, which is not that far away, 50% of adults in this country will be considered obese. 6 in 10 adults in this country will have a chronic disease. If we keep going the way we're going, approximately 50 million people will have type 2 diabetes.
It's shocking. It's not overly surprising. I've been talking about this for a while with my students again about diabetes. And I do know also that exercise does increase insulin sensitivity. So type 2 diabetes is something you can actually exercise your way out of.
Totally.
You know,
Totally.
with and if you're following the right nutrition, you can't like jam yourself full of Snickers bars and think running a 5K is gonna fix everything. But diet and exercise, you can walk yourself right out of type 2 diabetes.
A million percent. There's a new diabetes, no, it's not that new anymore, diabetes prevention program. I'm actually a certified coach for that too. And that's where in that pre-diabetes category, we can knock that right back. You do not need to progress to type 2 diabetes. And you do it with some dietary changes and physical activity.
And that's good for people to know that you can do this, not to mention the economic repercussions of that.
Massive economic repercussions. It's the big, huge strain on our economy to help manage all of this chronic illness. And also another thing they were saying, by 2030, we're going to have a shortfall by about 10 million of healthcare workers. So we're looking at a very difficult situation with, and I think we can see it even now with having trouble getting appointments and longer wait times at doctors' offices. So um, yeah, it's kind of everything colliding in a not a good way.
Yeah, I mean, this is the field to get into if you want job security, is to get into the medical field because right now we've got the baby boomer generation becoming senior citizens, or I think they actually might all be senior citizens now. With there might maybe the tail end or not yet, but so you've got the largest section of our population is now retiring. So all of those healthcare workers are leaving the workforce and they're becoming people who need healthcare workers. So
Exactly.
it's like this exponential effect that is happening. And so I implore people who are listening out there, if you haven't made your mind up yet, pick a health profession and get into it because you will always have a job. All of these statistics you gave, Kira, I'm going to do like a little Ebenezer Scrooge thing here. These are not unavoidable predictors of the future, right? We can change this, right? Like Scrooge said to the ghost of Christmas yet to come. Like these shadows are not predetermined. We can change these things. We can avoid these statistics if we get health coaches who can help us to eat better, exercise, avoid stress, all of these things that I think are going to really benefit people.
Exactly. Yeah. And so health coaching kind of falls under the field of functional medicine. I don't know if you talk about that at all, but functional or integrative medicine or lifestyle medicine, there's a couple different terms, but functional medicine is where we are going beyond just treating the symptoms and looking at root cause and looking at different ways besides just surgery and medications. And the biggest one being lifestyle change to, like you just said, just avoid all of this. We can turn it around, um, with some lifestyle change and focusing on root cause. So I think the field of functional medicine and health coaching is it's gonna blossom over the next decade.
I think so too. And Kira, I can't thank you enough. That was a gold mine of information that could be positive, affecting people's health. And I really, really appreciate you spending your time with me this morning.
Oh, my pleasure. I love nothing better than talking about this stuff. So thank you for having me. And thanks for getting the message out.
We will. I'm going to share your website on the show notes so that people can find you if they're interested in more. And you're on Zoom, so it really doesn't matter where they live. And even though you are in Eastern Pennsylvania with me, you live about a mile and a half away from me, I think. And so, but because it's on Zoom, anyone can reach out for Kira's advice. Thank you so much again, Kira Kramen. I look forward to seeing you in person, probably sometime soon.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you once again, Kira Kramen, for joining me on the podcast. If you want to check out our website, please do. It's awellfedlife.org. And once again, I'm going to put that on the show notes so that you can click it directly from that link.
Bombas makes the most comfortable socks, underwear, and T-shirts.
Warning, Bombas are so absurdly comfortable you may throw out all your other clothes.
Sorry, do we legally have to say that?
No, this is just how I talk, and I really love my Bombas.
They do feel that good. And they do good, too. One item purchased equals one item donated.
To feel good and do good, go to bombas.com and use code AUDIO for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com and use code AUDIO at checkout.
Lowe's knows you've got a job to do, and we help get it done. With the MyLowe's Pro Rewards program, eligible members save more with volume discounts on qualifying orders through a quote of $2,000 or more. Join for free today. Lowe's, we help, you save. Offer can't be combined with any other discount, contract, and/or special pricing. Exclusions, more terms, and restrictions apply. Details at lowes.com/terms. Subject to change.
All right, so having said that, I think it's time to move into the content for today's episode. Like I said before, we're going to finish up the endocrine system with the talk about some hormones. I'm not going to get into a ton of detail on some of them because some of them are very specifically associated with other organ systems that we've not yet gotten to in this podcast. So I'll give you kind of the overall lowdown on some of them, but the real details are going to be more impactful if we do them in context later on in the further episodes where we get into the reproductive system, the digestive system, the urinary system, etc. So I'll cover a few with some detail, but the rest I'm just going to kind of glaze over and give you an idea. And you'll see further episodes when they become more in-depth. So I'm going to start with another pure endocrine gland called the pineal gland. The pineal gland is part of the nervous system, really, because it is a section of the epithalamus. The epithalamus is part of the diencephalon of the brain. You remember the hypothalamus and the thalamus. Well, the epithalamus is another piece of the diencephalon, but it is glandular tissue, and it secretes hormones. Specifically, the most significant of those is melatonin, which you've probably heard of because you probably have seen over-the-counter dietary supplements called melatonin. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit after we get into what this is. So the pineal gland is found in the posterior or caudal part of the brain. If you look just superior to the superior colliculi of the midbrain and just inferior to the splenium of the corpus callosum, you'll see the pineal gland. And it looks kind of like a pine nut, or in Italian, you would call that a pignoli nut. If you're familiar with pignoli nut cookies, which are just about the best cookies in the world, then you know what I'm talking about. In children, it's larger than it is in adults because its function really is about childhood. And what it does is it shrinks over time as we get older. But once you reach about 7 years old, it starts shrinking pretty quickly. And by the time you're a grown-up or an adult, it's just this little piece of fibrous tissue sitting in that spot. When an organ shrinks like that, we call that involution, and we're going to see that in a couple other organs as time goes on. Now, here's the interesting thing about the pineal gland. It actually receives nerve signals from your eyes. So if you look at the neural pathway for vision, you'll notice that not all of the nerve signals go from the retina to the occipital lobe for you to perceive an image. There's a lot more to vision than image perception. So the light striking the retina also stimulates other things. And one of those things is what we call the circadian rhythm, which is your sleep-wake cycles associated with light, with whether it's light out or whether it's dark out. The pineal gland uses its hormone melatonin to establish those rhythms in childhood. So what happens is that some of the nerve fibers from the optic nerves that come from your retina are not just going to the occipital lobe so that you can perceive the image, but some of them are actually going to go in a different direction and go along pathways that are not about image perception. And one of those is to the suprachiasmatic nuclei of the hypothalamus, which we talked about in earlier episodes. So from there, the signal is going to go from the suprachiasmatic nuclei to paraventricular nuclei next to the ventricles, down the brainstem and spinal cord, to preganglionic neurons of the sympathetic nervous system, to the sympathetic chain of ganglia, to the superior cervical ganglion, to postganglionic sympathetic fibers, and back into the cranial cavity before it finally reaches the pineal gland. So think of that pathway. It's leaving your cranial cavity and going down your spinal cord so that it can exit the spinal cord through the sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system. It's going to go through the typical autonomic pathway for the sympathetic division into the autonomic ganglion, then to a superior cervical ganglion, to a postganglionic fiber, until it eventually reaches its target, which is the pineal gland. And the pineal gland is going to use those nerve signals to establish your light, dark, wake, sleeping cycles. So those 24-hour cycles are called circadian rhythms. At night, the pineal gland secretes melatonin. That melatonin secretion is at its peak somewhere between 3 and 5 hours after you fall asleep. Melatonin receptors are all over the body, and they have a lot of different functions. But that melatonin is going to play a role in establishing those circadian rhythms. It's going to help promote sleep. It also has anti-cancer properties and antioxidants so that it can dismantle free radicals that could be damaging your cells and tissues. So we think of melatonin as something that's going to regulate sleepiness. I'm not sure if that's a really accurate way to put it. However, there is a pretty big industry in the supplement world that talks about melatonin as supplementation. And I did look up some stuff on that, and according to the Mayo Clinic, there is some evidence to suggest melatonin works for some things. However, before I talk about what the Mayo Clinic has published, I want to make sure that you understand that I am in no way suggesting that you supplement with melatonin. Anything that you decide to take as a supplement or a medication of any kind, you should consult your medical doctor first. Anything that you want to give your kids, you should consult their pediatrician first. So I'm just telling you what the Mayo Clinic has found. Please don't take this as my recommendation for you to take melatonin. Now, what they've found, according to the Mayo Clinic, is that melatonin can help improve disorders of circadian rhythms in blind people. Also, it can help people who have a delayed sleep phase. So some people's sleep pattern is delayed by a few hours from a conventional sleep pattern. The research has shown that melatonin can reduce the length of time needed to fall asleep and advances the start of sleep in adults and children with this condition. Again, talk to your doctor before you take it or give it to a kid. Some research suggests that melatonin might slightly reduce the times it takes to fall asleep for people with insomnia. Some evidence shows that melatonin can improve jet lag symptoms. So if you travel across time zones and you have a hard time regulating when you're awake and when you're asleep because of the time difference, melatonin may help with that. And that's about all that I think that there's anything significant to suggest it works for. We have another gland that is much larger in kids than it is in adults, and that is the thymus. I'm not going to get into too much detail on the thymus at all because it plays its biggest role in the lymphatic and immune systems. It does also undergo involution so that it's much larger in fetuses and infants than it is in adults. It continues to grow until you're about maybe 6 years old or so, and then it starts to shrink. And by the time you're a senior citizen, there's really almost nothing left of it. It has roles in the endocrine system, the lymphatic system, and the immune system. And the most significant role it has in the endocrine system is secreting hormones that help regulate the lymphatic and immune systems. We find it in the thoracic cavity. It's actually in the mediastinum, which is between your lungs. It is found superior to your heart, kind of in the area of the trachea. And it has a lot of lobes, and it's very kind of granular looking. And it secretes the hormones thymopoietin, thymosin, and thymulin. And these hormones are going to stimulate the development of other lymphatic organs like the spleen, tonsils, and lymph nodes, and regulate the development and activity of what we call T lymphocytes. T lymphocytes are white blood cells that are very important in the function of the immune system. They are out there patrolling your body and making sure that foreign invaders, pathogens, don't make you sick. In fact, the reason why T lymphocytes are called T lymphocytes is because they fully mature in the thymus. So the T is for thymus. We also call T lymphocytes T cells. So, like I said, we're not going to get into more detail than that because really to understand what those hormones do, you kind of have to understand a lot more about the lymphatic system than we've gotten to yet. So we're going to hold off on that until a further episode when we get into the lymphatic system and we talk about what T cells are, what they do, and what all the other lymphatic organs do as well. So I do want to talk a little bit about the gonads, the testes and the ovaries, and the hormones that they are responsible for. But once again, not going to get into a ton of detail because it's going to be difficult to understand what they do when we haven't covered the reproductive system yet. So again, these are more hormones that we'll get into in more detail in context when we talk about that organ system. Now, the gonads, ovaries and testes, they're not just endocrine glands, they're also exocrine glands. Remember, that means they secrete something else. And the exocrine secretions or products of the gonads are egg cells or ova and sperm cells. And those are what we call our gametes. These are our cells that only have 23 chromosomes each that are unpaired so that the sperm cell can fertilize the egg cell they can join their nuclei together so that the new resultant nucleus can have 23 pairs of chromosomes. One set from the egg cell, one set from the sperm cell. And then we can produce an offspring. And that offspring will have the full complement of DNA necessary to exist. However, it takes a lot of hormones to make this happen. And so, this is also an endocrine function. The ovaries are mostly associated with estradiol, progesterone, and inhibin. Those are the three main hormones secreted by the ovaries. Now, we also have androgens like androstenedione, estriol, and estrone. And those will be in lesser amounts than the main three I mentioned. These hormones are mainly going to be associated with making sure that an egg cell that has been released and fertilized has a place to be implanted and supported so that a pregnancy can be sustained. Also making sure that if that pregnancy goes all the way and there's a birth of a newborn, that the mammary glands are prepared for lactation so that we can nourish the newborn. That's what we're mainly seeing estradiol and progesterone associated with. Inhibin makes sure that we don't have too many egg cells being fertilized at once. So we'll talk more about this in the reproductive system. Inhibin is a hormone that is also secreted by the ovary to make sure that new follicles in the ovary aren't getting more eggs ready to be released when someone's already pregnant. The testes, which is plural for testis, also secretes weak androgens and estrogens and inhibin, but its main secretion is testosterone. Testosterone stimulates the development of the biological male's reproductive system in the fetus and the adolescent, also helps to develop secondary sex characteristics, which would be like the masculine physique, muscular hair on your chest, beard, deepening of the voice, things like that, and also regulates the sex drive. And that happens throughout life. Whereas biological females are only going to release egg cells for a certain amount of time until they're in their late 40s or 50s, biological males can continue to produce sperm throughout their life. And testosterone helps to sustain that for the entire adult life. All right, so now let's hit on the rest of the organs that have some endocrine function. Like I said, I'm not going to get into a lot of depth with this because the reason why they have so much endocrine function is because those hormones are an integral part of how those organ systems function. So things that I already covered or things that we're going to be covering in the future, I'm going to kind of glaze over them. But I do want to talk about one really important one, which is the skin. People don't realize that the skin is more than just your barrier against the outside world. It has a pretty big role in the endocrine system. It produces a lot of hormones. It's also receiving a lot of hormones as well. Now, you might remember the skin regarding its relationship with calcium homeostasis. The skin cells of the epidermis produce cholecalciferol when ultraviolet light strikes the skin and stimulates that. And then that cholecalciferol, which is a steroid, goes through your bloodstream and eventually reaches your liver and kidneys, where it is ultimately converted into vitamin D3, which is an important factor in making sure that we can absorb calcium from our digestive system into our bloodstream and then deposit it into our bones. So that's one aspect of skin. But the skin also synthesizes things like prolactin, epinephrine and norepinephrine, insulin-like growth factors, androgens, estrogen, progesterone, and eicosanoids like prostaglandins, prostacyclins, and leukotrienes. So the skin is synthesizing and releasing into the bloodstream a lot of different hormones. So that's kind of an interesting one to consider because we don't think of the skin as doing much, but it has pretty important endocrine function as well. The liver we're going to talk about in depth when we get into the digestive system. But also the liver plays a pretty big role in some other endocrine function. It helps to regulate your blood pressure by secreting a protein called angiotensinogen, which we'll talk about in the urinary system because angiotensinogen is part of what's called the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone pathway that is a really big blood pressure regulator. It secretes a small percentage of erythropoietin, which stimulates the production of red blood cells, which is called erythropoiesis. It also secretes insulin-like growth factors that helps mediate the action of growth hormone so that tissues can grow and repair themselves by initiating mitosis. It plays a role in iron homeostasis with hepcidin. So what hepcidin does, it controls the iron levels in your blood by decreasing how much your intestines absorb iron from your diet and also how much iron that's being stored by your liver is released. So that way, if we have too much iron in our diet, we can decrease its amount of absorption so that we're not being overloaded by iron in our bloodstream. Now, the kidneys also play a role in calcium homeostasis because they are going to convert the final form of calcidiol into calcitriol, which is vitamin D3. So the kidneys, in conjunction with the skin and liver, are going to finish off that vitamin D synthesis that's important for calcium homeostasis. Also, the kidneys play that role in the renin-angiotensin pathway because that enzyme renin converts angiotensinogen into something called angiotensin 1, and then it eventually gets converted into angiotensin 2. And again, this is a whole system we're going to talk about later, so I don't want to get into the weeds on it. Also, the kidneys secrete the rest of the erythropoietin for red blood cell production. So that's important. When the kidneys are not functioning at a high level, you can ultimately end up with anemia because there's not enough red blood cells that are being produced by your body to carry the oxygen that's necessary to carry through your bloodstream. The heart actually secretes hormones, specifically something called natriuretic peptides. These hormones work on how much sodium that we release out of our urine and how much we conserve. By getting rid of sodium, by increasing our sodium excretion through the urine, we can lower our blood volume and in turn our blood pressure because where sodium goes, water goes. So the more sodium ions that are put into your urine, the more water is being drawn into the urine. And then ultimately we increase our urine output. And if we increase urine output, we decrease the amount of blood plasma we have available, which we call blood volume. And then if you decrease the volume of a fluid inside a vessel, you decrease the pressure. So lower blood volume means lower blood pressure.
You buy a pair of socks, that's 2 socks. You buy a pair of Bombas socks, that's 4 socks. Because one purchased is one donated. Socks are the #1 most requested clothing item in homeless shelters. So when you buy a pair of super comfortable Bombas socks, you're also donating a pair. Bombas customers have powered over 150 million donations. So Bombas would like to thank you 150 million times. But we only have like 30 seconds. Go to bombas.com and use code AUDIO for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com and use code AUDIO at checkout.
Your skeletal muscles secrete hormones, specifically hormones called myokines. And these hormones target the liver and fat tissue so that we can increase the amount of available energy circulating in your bloodstream by breaking down fats, called lipolysis, and also increasing the amount of glucose we produce via gluconeogenesis. Those will ultimately liberate energy in your bloodstream so that your skeletal muscles can utilize them to increase their muscle contraction. Now, the digestive system uses hormones extensively. In fact, the very first hormone ever discovered was a digestive hormone called secretin. So the stomach and the intestines, small intestine, large intestine, they produce a lot of hormones. And they utilize these hormones to regulate digestive activity. And we call these hormones enteric hormones. So there's a lot of different kinds. I'm not going to get into the specifics on these hormones because we're going to really get deep into enteric hormones when we get to the digestive system in the episodes of this podcast. I'll name a few for you: cholecystokinin, ghrelin, gastrin, secretin. These are some examples of hormones that regulate digestive processes in your digestive system. Your adipose tissue also secretes hormones, most notably leptin. Leptin has long-term effects on regulating your appetite by targeting your hypothalamus. Your hypothalamus determines whether or not you are hungry or not hungry. So leptin can regulate that by targeting the hypothalamus from your adipose tissue. So when your adipose tissue levels are low, so you have a decrease in body fat, the leptin levels will be low. And that will stimulate your hypothalamus to make you feel hungry to increase your food intake. But if leptin levels are high, that's going to let your hypothalamus know that you have plenty of adipose tissue and that you don't need to be as hungry. So you don't want to increase your food intake. Your bones secrete hormones: osteocalcin and lipocalcin 2. These are hormones that stimulate the pancreas's beta cells to release insulin. So believe it or not, your bone tissue helps to regulate glucose metabolism by promoting insulin secretion. Now, in a pregnant female, there is a structure called the placenta. The placenta is kind of the connection between the pregnant mother and the fetus. The nutrition is going to go through that placenta. Red blood cells, oxygen, removal of wastes, all of those things are going to travel from the mother to the fetus through the placenta. But the placenta also secretes hormones, estrogen, progesterone, and others that help to regulate the whole pregnancy process and stimulate the development of the fetus and help make sure that the mother's mammary glands are prepared to nourish that fetus once it's born. All right, I think that's probably plenty in terms of other hormones. And I think that that is enough to end this endocrine discussion. So I hope that this has helped you with the endocrine system. Like I said, there's a lot more to it than what I've covered. And we will discuss very significant hormones later on when we get to them in context. So hopefully you'll stay tuned to further episodes so that you can continue to get that information. And like I always say, I really hope this is helping you get your B or better in A&P. I want to send out a very big thank you to my guest today, Kira Kramen, certified health and wellness coach. She has graced us with a ton of knowledge about what health and wellness coaches do. I hope that you've gained some knowledge about that. Don't forget to check out her website, awellfedlife.org. Once again, I'll put it on the show notes. And again, thank you for listening. I can't say enough how much I enjoy having people benefit from this podcast, and I really love getting your emails. So please send me an email. If you have any questions, please send me an email to minus55media@gmail.com and send me your question, and I'll try to answer them on the podcast. Having said that, thank you once again. And in the next episode, we're going to be leaving the endocrine system and starting up the circulatory system. I'll talk to you then. Anatomy and Physiology Bit by Bit is a production of Minus 55 Media. Please take the time to rate the podcast, and don't forget to check out my YouTube channel, Student Help for AP. That's Student Help, the number 4, AP. There's a whole lot of tutor videos on there that I think you're going to find helpful. Special thanks to my family, Bucks County Community College, and McGraw-Hill Education, where you can find Anatomy and Physiology Digital Suite, my low-cost, tutor video-based digital learning solution for anatomy and physiology, already being used at several colleges and universities.